All right. So how did y'all like David? Inspiring, right? Looking into the future. It really is hard to believe that our fall forum is drawing to an end. I'm a little sad. I'm going to miss you all. But we have one more exercise for y'all. We're going to spend this last time together, our last moments, talking about collaborative strategic planning. It's an experiment, but I hope you'll go along for the journey. Now, as we heard from Kaihan yesterday, a key to strategy is truly understanding the questions you're asking. Let's borrow from Einstein again. If I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on the solution, I would spend the first 55 minutes determining the proper question to ask. We actually heard that quote from last year's Fall Forum from Kathy Trower, if you were with us. She gave us 3 key modes of board governance: generative, strategic, and fiduciary. When boards thrive, she said, they're operating successfully in all 3 of those modes. And she told us that where boards struggle the most is in that generative space, when you're seeking to make the sense of emerging opportunities and complex challenges, where you don't rush too quickly to solutions, but like a pack of Einsteins, live in the questions for 55 minutes. That's particularly important because some of the challenges we're facing today are really huge. Many of these issues cannot be solved alone at our theaters. As we heard from David, the opportunities are for collective action. We need that more and more.
Okay, so this takes on particular urgency for TCG as we head into our national conference in Washington, D.C. 3rd to 25th, save the date. Our theme is Theater Nation, and we're really excited to collectively define what it could mean to be a citizen of Theater Nation. How can we disrupt the problems of nationalism while at the same time harness the power of citizenship? Can we imagine a nation defined not by borders, but by a shared commitment to artistry and activism, working towards a more equitable world? So this last session is an experiment in all of that. The goals are to share an exercise in generative thinking that we can bring back to our organizations to strengthen governance, to develop a collaborative strategic exercise that can be used at our conference in DC, to affirm the value of collective action in addressing issues facing our field, and to spend more time in questions.
So, we're going to kick off with an exercise called Question to Question Tactics.
Gus, unmute your mic.
Governance. I am not on. Acting like a theater person.
Okay, now I'm back. Now I'm back in conference.
Thank goodness, now we can hear you.
All right. Now I can be serious. So, over the past 3 days, we've heard a lot about the importance of asking the right questions, and we've in the breakout sessions we heard wonderful examples of folks who were reframing questions in really powerful ways that led to transformations at their organizations, right? So we decided, okay, if that's a good thing to do, if living with these questions in a generative space is of value, how exactly do you do that? And you do that by asking questions of the questions, right? So we have 5 things that we want to try with you today. 5 ways of unlocking questions that have been particularly difficult for us. The first is the flip. You flip it. And this is, let's say your question was, why are we seeing a decline in subscribers? The way you could flip that question is by saying, why are the subscribers that we still have coming back? And when you flip the question in that way, you might get a whole different set of answers that helps you bring in more subscribers. Question 2, widen the frame. Let's say your question was, why aren't we attracting younger audiences? Well, when you widen that frame to be larger than your theater, you might ask, well, what do the young people do? And where do they do it, right? And by widening that frame, you might find out that the question is actually not just about marketing, but it has a programmatic aspect. It has a whole sort of values aspects, right? And so that's what happens when you widen the frame on the question. You can move the center. This is something that's been really powerful for TCG in our equity, diversity, and inclusion work. When we were asking how do we diversify the field, the center lived in a particular place, and our strategies reflected how do we diversify theaters that have historically been predominantly white. But when we moved that center to theaters of color who have been doing this work for a long time, a different set of questions and a different set of strategies emerged. That's what happens when you move the center of the question. Number 4 is you can divide and conquer. Thank goodness, some battle metaphors at last. Divide and conquer. We know with any single complex question is usually made up of a bunch of smaller, tricky questions within it, right? So if the question is, why can't we retain the top talent on our staff? There's actually a series of questions within that. Well, what are our HR practices? What's our organizational culture, right? What is the compensation piece of that? And so sometimes when you have that question that feels too big to answer, you divide and you conquer. And the 5th is apples and oranges. Sometimes the words that we've inherited for things actually cloud the meaning of the question. Sometimes the question hides a scarier question that we're afraid to ask. When you switch words in the question to a different word that is similar but not the same, apples but not oranges, it can illuminate the question in surprising ways, right? So if the question is, why isn't our board more engaged? You could switch out the board with a different word. You could switch it out to say, why isn't our team of theater-loving superheroes more engaged? Similar to the word board, but not the same.
Not the same. Not the same.
And you might get the answer, oh, because we're treating them like a board, and not like a team of theater-loving superheroes.
That's right.
Okay? So you switch the apple and the orange. So these are the 5 tools that we have created to help you question the question. And how are we going to do that, Devin?
So we are going to start with a bit of a narrow frame. We're going to ask you to take out paper and a pen.
Or an iPad.
Or an iPad.
Or
a laptop. Or just your brain. If you're not really a writing person, you're more of a thinking person. And we're going to start really simply. We're going to give you 5 minutes to just process everything that you've learned here this weekend, this morning, yesterday, using these 5 tools. If they're helpful for you, if they're not, discard them and use something that is. And in 5 minutes from now, we'll tell you the next step to this exercise. So, go.
10 to 15 minutes or so, probably 15, we're going to form little clusters of 3 or 4. So the 3 of you could be a wonderful cluster. So triads or quads, to take what you've been thinking about individually and bringing it to a little bit of a larger group. Again, we're trying to interrogate and reframe the very questions that we're asking. We need to live in this space before we go to strategy. Why we're doing at the end? That's strategic as well. So for the next 15 minutes, bring this to your triads or your quads. And then, as with past fall forums, we've created space for us to talk about some field-wide challenges together. So just know that after your quads, we're going to be bringing things into a larger group. So think about that as you're going through. What's really coming up for you around these questions? Is anybody not clear? Can everybody find a triad or quad for 15 minutes? Awesome. Thank you all.
Down your conversations. Bring it to a close, a gentle close. There'll be plenty of more time to talk.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for going along with us this far. So as you know, at the end of past fall forums, we have created space for this kind of conversation, right? About challenges that we're not only facing at our theaters, but also field-wide. And those conversations have been exciting, energizing, frustrating, right? Because there's this feeling of we have this short time together. Let's try to solve everything. Let's try to say everything, right? We can't do that, right? We only have a little bit of time. But what we might be able to do in this little bit of time that we have left is crack open some of the questions, right? To make more possible within some of those questions. So what's going to happen now is, hopefully you found those conversations fruitful and passionate and interesting. We're hoping that you're now going to share some of the things that struck you in your conversation. They could be in the form of a reframed question, but they don't have to be. However, know that whatever you say will be turned into a question by me. I will be interpreting and translating everything into a question. And the point of that being, at the end of this popcorn process, we're going to project those questions up on the screen, and we're going to move into a fishbowl process where people can come up and start to talk about those questions and a real deep dive into them in the 20 minutes that we'll have for that. That's the plan. And then we'll have solved everything. Devin?
Yeah, and just to clarify one thing, when Gus says he's translating everything to questions, he means he's live taking notes in real time in a Google Doc that we will then project after the exercise.
It's the future.
So he's not going to talk back to you when you state your question or your observation. He's doing it all on the computer, and then the future will become now.
And also, because we like this word too, just so we know, he's forming into a question and also clustering like-minded
Clustering.
themes. So we'll have themes.
A lot of clustering.
We'll have some live clustering. Thanks.
Real quick, can you maybe pull that shade down, because it's really hard to look at your faces with this lighting.
Oh,
How do
Kevin, would you mind?
Can you-
Is
I
there a
don't-
way?
The light coming from Kevin?
The light's coming from Kevin.
Are you waving at us?
And Jose is going to help us. Thank you, Jose. Oh, he's got it. All right,
Thank you.
Devin's going to
Thank you, Kevin.
explain the rest.
So how this exercise is going to work, we have a little time for it, but if it comes naturally to an earlier close, we'll move into the next part of the exercise when that happens. But if it doesn't, if there's a lot of energy here, we have around a half an hour. But the thing that you really need to understand is that when you pop up to share your question or observation, you have 1 minute to speak. I was given this role because I'm really good at interrupting people. And Kevin Bitterman here, who is going to queue up his timekeeping app for me right now, is going to signal me, and I'm going to signal you. I'll give you a 10-second warning, and then I will cut you off after 1 minute, because we want to make space for as many people to talk as would like to.
Also, we recognize that not everybody likes to talk. So if you don't feel like you want to popcorn a comment, and our mic runners will be running around, if you want to write something, Devin and I will be trying to roam the space. You can just give us your question or thought, and we'll give it to Gus.
Just hold up your piece of paper.
If you don't want to actually verbally say anything, we have another option. So that's all. Was there a question? Question.
Just pop up.
Yes,
Oh, we're starting
please.
now. Yes, great.
A really productive question around marketing. Why does our marketing seem ineffective? And, So our discussion was about marketing, and Catherine Carr Kelly from Center Square gave us this milkshake analogy. Some professor at Harvard says, why do you hire the milkshake, right? Why do you order the milkshake? And we turned that into a series of questions about why are our patrons hiring us to produce theater or not hiring us? Are we making it too difficult with ticketing technology? Are we turning them off with play selection? Are we just not communicating a great play in our marketing materials? So that was our question. Why are our patrons hiring us to produce theater?
Excellent. You didn't even take a minute.
Inspired by the statement, the way things are made is being remade, and posted in a question, the way we make theater is being remade, and how does that affect us? Do we consider a change of aesthetics? Is there more to pursue in our seasons than what we consider the well-made play?
Nice. There was one behind her. I also want to stress that right before you begin, there are 2 mics here on stands. If it's faster for you to get to those mics and the mic runner to get to you, feel free to do that as well.
That runner was pretty
All
quick
right.
on her feet. So our question was, how do individual theaters best engage in strategic planning when the things that we're wrestling with are germane to the entire field? So we can do something that's sort of charting our own course, but the destiny of the field, and particularly what funders are encouraging, will chart a different course. And in particular, we talked about, well, David threw out, what was the way it was framed? why do we need new plays? This was, and the corollary of that is if we have lost our appetite and interest in our past, is the work that we're doing in the present really interesting?
We have a question here. Annabelle will bring you the mic.
I'll use the flip technique. Why do we have so many white patrons?
Interesting. There have to be more
We
questions.
have two comments. One is how we do our work is as important as the work that we do. How do we get our heads around that? That how we do it is as important as the work that we actually do. And why is taking time to think and plan so scary and hard for so many of us? Taking the time. Why is taking the time so hard?
We'll do here first, and then Anna, if you could give her the mic for the next one. You start.
I'm going to speak from the trustee perspective, and my question is, are we agile enough?
Great. That was like
Hi.
10 seconds.
Hello.
Not even.
Devin, I'm at the mic stand.
Our company
sorry.
only produces work itinerantly throughout the Cleveland community, and it's difficult sometimes to build the audience in different places. So the flip of my question for how do we do that is, why are so many theater companies invested in hard bricks and mortar in a single solitary site?
Good question. Michael.
I wrote down the question, how do we aim for the fourth option without injuring our peers? And then I flipped it to say, how do we use the fourth option to uplift our peers and all be stronger organizations? Second question, how do we coordinate the uncoordinated around making the field equitable for all?
Can you repeat the first question?
Sure. I'll do the flip of it. How do we use the fourth option to uplift our peers and be stronger organizations, and I'll add a stronger field?
Great, thank you. Kelvin.
Hi. One of the questions that came up was, Carmen Morgan brought up, is saying loudly that we are part of anti-racist organizations. And if so, are we doing enough to dismantle the structures that enforce systemic racism?
We have a question over here. Where's my mic runner? We have go ahead.
On went over the Chance Theater. So we were asking, what do we want to do in the next 5 to 10 years? And we flipped that to say, what does our community need from the Chance in the next 5 to 10 years? And then our friends over the National Black Theater were asking the question of what are their audiences looking for in their theater productions, and they were asking the question, are their audiences there for the theater or for the experiences around the theater?
Okay, we have another one in the back, and then I'll get to you. Great.
Hi, my name is Snehal Desayan with East West Players, and our conversation revolved about how few of our cities and towns have programs to get our youth and the next generation into our theater, and are we also doing all we can to bring them into our theaters and bringing theater to them?
Could you actually repeat that? It was a little hard to hear you at the front of the room.
Our conversation revolved around bringing the next generation and youth into our theaters and bringing theater to them, and how little funding and support there is these days to bring schools and school children to theater.
Great, thank you. Over here?
The question, one of the questions we had, which I don't think we properly flipped, but is how do we keep the board thinking at a strategic level rather than slipping back into focusing on solving very specific problems? And I think we have a question behind me too.
Okay, Rock?
The flip of this question would be, why can't we persuade more local and national institutional funders to support the process of artistic creation and artist compensation rather than just the results of artistic creation?
Who has a mic?
I have a mic.
Great. And actually, if you don't mind and are able to stand, would you mind doing that so everyone just knows kind of where the voice is coming from?
So we're always focused on, or at least I'm always focused on scarcity and flipping that to what do we have an abundance of and how do we sell that?
We have right here. Okay. Go ahead.
So my question is, how do we send the message that art has value and it's worth paying for, specifically theater, worth paying for, in a way that we can pay artists what they're worth and continue to ensure that theater is accessible to all people in all ways?
Right behind you.
So this wasn't something that came up in the conversation, but something that I've been thinking about, which is, what if the work, and I haven't flipped this, so help would be nice. What if the work that fulfills us doesn't seem to fulfill our available audiences or funders?
Great. I'm going to go to the standing mic.
Okay. How do we ensure that theaters of color will thrive?
Thank you.
In spite of all the other options that people have, why do people still keep coming to the theater in such large numbers?
Hi, we talked a lot about the front of house experience and how can we change the experience at the theater, and then we reframed that and said rather than work on changing the experience at the theater, how do we change the experience about theater out there in the communities, and will doing that then in fact change the experience at the theater. And then we went further and said, does front of house experience even matter? Is it really just about the art on stage?
I got one. Some oldies but goodies. Taken from OSF yesterday, one of the questions they asked in their strategic plan is how will people access theater arts in the future? To which we added, how do we embrace technology? And then also the flip of that, how do we embrace the escape from technology? And then on the other side, what do our board members need from us?
They could probably answer that.
One of the things we were talking about was education, and it's not the primary mission of our organization. So how do we, the question I started with, and that we started with, was how do we reevaluate our education program when it's not the primary mission of your organization? So we kind of flipped it and took it from the different people's perspectives, from the man who's teaching education, from the students, what do they want, from the donors. How do we build that into something bigger that can, and do we want to, but that can sustain itself, that this outreach could then bring new donors in?
Annabelle? Mm-hmm.
I have two. It's a flip of how are we maintaining, expanding, and remaining successful without taking the time to plan and strategize. And then the second is more individual about how do I convince people that another theater organization, a theater of color in our community is not a threat to what we do.
What are the forces that tend to make theater more elitist, and what can we do to push back in the other direction?
Anyone else?
Why does the word anti-racist make everyone uncomfortable?
Okay, we have one behind you.
How do we follow the lead of Hattie Lou Theater and make a community-based sustainability process? I would add, how do we have such a great name as Hattie Lou Theater?
It's named after his daughters, I believe.
How do we create cultures of strategic thinking, not just strategic plans? How do we make space for the things we cannot plan? How do we solve the problem? Moving from solving the problem to how to solve the problem. And then just backtracking a second, in terms of how to make the space for the things we cannot plan, thinking about the Serenity Prayer as a strategic plan prayer.
Nice. Nice. In the back.
Scott Well, Chance Theater. We had a very simple question. How do we
attract top talent and staff within our limited budget. And I have to credit Ek from Hattiloo for kind of giving us a partial answer to that, who suggested to hire, with the limited funds available, a part-time manager of interns and volunteers and coordinate the people of the community to get them involved. So kind of flipping that into how can we get the people in the community more involved in our theater?
Coordinate the uncoordinated. Anyone else? Right here?
One of the things that resonated for us out of Kaihan's discussion yesterday was what rules are we following that we don't have to, which makes us evaluate what rules are we following to start with.
We have one over here.
We talked about communication between board and staff and kind of the inherent nature of you've got board people who aren't really experts in the industry but who want to participate. So our question was, how do we as board convince staff to let us help in a meaningful way without getting in their way?
Anyone else? Okay, we're going to do a last call. And then you guys are much less long-winded than we thought you might be. So this
Devin, don't say that.
Good thing. Which I think is great, because I think that just means that you've really been able to crystallize some things this weekend for you in terms of the questions that you're asking. So we're going to end this exercise a bit earlier than we thought and move it into the next phase of this exercise, which Gus alluded to earlier. And for that, our favorite Carmen Morgan is going to help us explain what is happening next, because we learned this exercise from her and find it a very valuable large group conversation tool.
Okay, I'm going to try to be really brief with giving directions so we can get started. We'd like the bulk of this time to be spent on conversation. You all, we're going to do an organic prioritizing process based on people who want to talk about something are going to come take a seat to talk about it. So this is an organic panel discussion that's just going to be freestyle. And here's how it's going to work. You've got something that you want to say based on some of the themes that we're going to go over right after I give you the directions. And these themes were created as a result of what we just did, which was popcorn. I was sitting behind somebody who said, "What's popcorn? What does that mean?" Okay, so that was the ideas that were popping up that Gus was tracking and documenting, and right now, as I speak, he's organizing them thematically. They're going to be up here, projected so that you all can see them as guideposts. But you don't have to be limited to those topics. You can pick something else that was triggered as a result of reading those. So here are the instructions. Very simple. You've got something that you want to say and you want to share. Please take a seat and speak from this seat. What's going on over here? Oh, okay. I was like, is this... you can speak for as long as you like, and this is why it's organic prioritizing, because those who want to speak are going to be motivated to come and take a seat up here. You can, from this seat, invite other people to come up and speak. You can pose questions to the broader group. You can make a proclamation. You can exclaim. You can do anything you want as long as you're sitting in a seat up here. For those of you who don't feel comfortable taking a seat, just feel free to write any comment down on your piece of paper that you should have and hold it up. Somebody's going to come get it from you, and they will funnel it to someone who's going to be sitting in here gently moderating the conversation. What else? Oh, if you want to take a seat and they're all full, just stand up here on the stage so that the people here can see that somebody's waiting, and this is the beautiful, organic, self-facilitated part of this, is that usually it prompts somebody who's finished with what they're saying to get up, okay? And so there might be 2 or 3 people standing here, and folks will get the message. It's all gonna be organic. And then, can you, I'm gonna ask this, and I'm just gonna ask the request, you all are gonna do it, can you please limit the side conversations? We want all the action and activity to be up here if at all possible. Just for a minute, this is only gonna be about 40 minutes, just all the attention and the activity up here. The side conversation works well for the people in the side conversation, but the rest of us that are around you are distracted. So can I encourage that as one of the ground rules? I think that's it. Any questions before we go over the big themes? Are we good? Okay. So Gus, do you need a little bit more time? Oh, question. Oh. Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you. So if you want to make sure that the person you've got a question for doesn't relinquish their seat, stand behind the person that you might have a very specific question for. Other than that, just stand to the side so people know you're waiting to claim a seat. And then when our time is up, we're going to start removing the chairs so that folks will know that we're winding down, and it'll be last call.
Carmen, I just wanted to, are there any other discussion agreements we want to share, like, listen for understanding and not debate, or anything that would be helpful, or is that not helpful? Not helpful. Okay.
Since Stefina has raised it, just some quick, we probably don't need to raise this for this group, but the working assumptions for this conversation to be effective is just that we're probably not all going to agree. That's not a big, that's not the goal here. The process is designed to just surface and support discussion, healthy engagement. If you can try to listen, not to debate, but with an openness to engage, and I think that's probably it, right? Okay, okay. I think we're going to get started. Gus, how are you doing? Do you need a little bit more time?
I am good. I'm
going to
continue working on this.
Okay.
As we go, so we should switch over to this.
Jose, can you switch over to the live screen so you're all going to watch Gus continue to take notes?
Really
The
exciting.
future is now. Annabelle, can I
Magic
have
is
that mic?
happening.
Do you want to highlight some things?
Can we still see?
I think maybe a little bigger.
This is the big groups. Yeah, they're all clustered. Okay.
Okay, folks, is it helpful to read through these quickly, or should we just get started? Okay, great. So we're ready to get started. So as of right now, please join me up here if you've got something to say. And again, those are suggestions and guides, but you don't have to be limited to talking from that. And I think we'll need microphones.
Once you sit down, we'll hand you a mic.
Okay, so once all these seats are occupied, we're going to ask for support that there's no side conversation, that the show is up here.
Would you like to come down? No, you're just adjusting in your seat?
Carmen says to start. So there was a question about what do your board members want from you, and general questions about how we should be supporting you better. I will always start, so I serve on the board of 3 performing arts companies. 2 of them are music-based, and one of them is Lantern Theater Company. And they range in size from $150,000 budgets to $45 million. The first and most important thing is that we want you to succeed in your mission. We want you to be making the kind of art that you want to make. We also want you to be financially sustainable. So how you organize yourselves and make budgets and hold yourselves accountable to those budgets is really important to us in our role as fiduciaries. But there's a lot of psychic investment in that too. So it's not just a legalistic or governance issue for us. The other thing is, most of us, obviously, this is a volunteer experience. It needs to be positive. So, I mean, and theater and music, performing arts are uniquely qualified to make this a positive experience, because it can be glamorous, it can be fun, it can be social. And I would urge you to call on your artistic and creative skills to think about ways to make that possible. Someone said, can we make going to the theater as easy as having dinner with friends? And I know you're talking about performance-based theater, but your board experience should be like that too. It should be fun and social and reinforcing of the reasons that we are there to support you in terms of mission and art.
So, do you have a pressing question? Oh, okay, so that you just wanted to offer that?
Yep.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
I see a lot of people who are adjusting, looking like they want to come down, but are nervous about being the next person. It's a safe space.
My question for the group would be about Gus's question, framed here as what does our capitalist frame of work keep us from seeing? And it takes me back to Kaihan's question about doing good, and we're like, oh yeah, we all do good. We know that, obviously. But to me, this is actually the flip of the question would be, what does our collaborative frame of work keep us from seeing? It's not the popular question, but I think we very much think in terms of being collaborators because of the nature of our art form, but we less frequently think about where we live in a competitive field, who are our competitors, for donors, for audiences, for attention, for talent, for any of those things. I think we talk about it maybe within our organizations, but at least my personal experience has been less of a willingness to talk about it broadly in the field. When we have a good idea, we share it. That's what we're all here for. We don't keep it to ourselves. So, does anybody have thoughts about competition versus collaboration in our organizations?
Checking. Okay. Actually, that's what I wanted to come down and kind of talk about with the subject of theaters of color. And of course, I think part of the conversation, and as you all know, that has become more relevant and prevalent in our conversation over the last 10 years is theaters of color, culturally specific organizations, diversifying your board, diversifying your programming and what have you. But yesterday, we were talking about be good. And it's almost having that mindset of raising money so that you can do more good. The more money you raise, the more good you can do. I think one of the things we need to be honest with is diversity really boils down to having more ticket sales, having more donors, having more butts and seats, having more subscribers. As our country continues to diversify with more black and brown people, the larger white institutions need those people to shore up, certain deficits on their, in their organization. And so the solution is diversify. Okay, let's diversify. Let's get more black people in here. Let's get more Hispanic people in here, and so on and so forth. But the thing is that the real value, in my humble opinion, of culturally specific organizations is that we understand the nuances. And so collaboration is not just about butts and seats, but it's about bringing an expert into your organization to help you create work that's more authentic. And so that collaboration is not only about the dollar, but it is also about doing the better good and the greater good for your audience. I mean, if you're doing you're creating a kitchen scene in a black, kitchen in the 1970s and you don't have Morton salt or Louisiana hot sauce on the table, then you're not really giving your audience an authentic representation. And so it's that partnership. So I think with Hattie Lou, we're looking for those collaborations not just so that you can, pimp us and say, look, we got some black folk in our theater, come buy some tickets, and that way, y'all can be donors because look how beautiful our space is. Yeah, they got a nice space, but look at ours, It's not just about that, but it is truly about strengthening us, giving us the opportunity to come into larger organizations, to showcase our culture and our nuance, learning from you, the larger organization, which helps us expand our capacity creatively and programmatically. And then a rising tide lifts all boats. So I think that's where the true collaboration comes in.
Yes, I want to support.
Yeah.
How many of you have seen Hamilton? Now, lower your hand if you paid, keep your hand up if you paid more than $250 for the ticket. So my question is, with regard to this capitalistic question, which is so fascinating to me because I watch this happen every year at the governance meeting. I bring this up, and I'm excited for this forum because I'd really like to get some feedback on this. My challenge as the producing artistic director of a growing organization is constantly staying in the black. We've had the good fortune of being in the black for the last 11 years since its founding. But as our budget grows and as our needs continue to grow, the question is always, how do we continue to make that money? Pay these prices, and then we are saying we won't give them something that has inherent value, deep value, for more than, we're not going to charge more than $35. And my message has always been theaters for everyone, theaters for everyone, theaters for everyone, so we got to keep the ticket prices low. But what about those people that can pay? What about the people that can pay $60 to come see a wonderful piece of regional theater work so that we can pay our actors more than minimum, so that we can pay our designers more than the $5 we're going to pay them for 2 weeks worth of work, This is the question I constantly have is why do we carry around this starving artist feeling with us that we all inherently sort of put into the groundwater of the work that we do when what we do matters so much. It's worth paying for, as much as the iPhone, as much as that Taylor Swift concert, or whatever. So it feels like, to me, the way it occurs for me is that every year I bring this up and I get, it's, one time I was told I misunderstood the question, and one time I was told, well, we just need to get more fundraisers, and this time the question was turned into, what is our capitalistic framework? But it's not about capitalism, it's not about, it is a little bit about fair market value, but to me, the more important question that I want to put out to the people here and up there is, why are we willing to continue to send the message that art doesn't have value and it's not worth paying for? And I am not at all trying to exclude people who cannot afford to pay for the ticket. If they can pay only $10, can we make opportunities available to them to get their ticket for $10? Can we give them free tickets? Can we anything? I'm talking about people who are willing to spend money on $75 bottles of wine, but not a $75 theater ticket.
Thank you. Yours next, and then David.
Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Institute, one of the things that we came away from in our all-day meeting was creating the will and determination to create something called an equity clause, which really comes from Sarah Bellamy, which is that we are held accountable. And when I say we were talking specifically about white theaters, or what did we end up with? Predominantly white theaters is what we decided, that we are held accountable for the assistance that we get from theaters of color to help us diversify. And if that means, so an equity clause would mean actually a legal clause written into agreements when we're working with, if we bring you in to work with us, that we're working as partners, that we're leveling the playing field, that we're taking away the power structure as best we can, and financially, that we're actually saying, you will benefit from this partnership in these really clear legal ways, and above that, you will benefit from the soft money that potentially comes in before and after the project, which is, we're gonna write you into the, if we're writing you into a grant, that, and there's money attached. So really, I think that's all I have to say to add to your thinking.
I'm also David Schmitz from Steppenwolf. I'm also on the or a part of the Institute. And one of the other things that I just like to share is, one of the things we've been talking some about is sort of the issue of reparations, and how do the mostly white institutions make reparations on the historic inequities of theaters of color. And we decided we would create a ticket fee, and La Jolla and I don't remember who else signed up to do this, which is essentially like a 5-cent ticket fee that would go to TCG and some fund that would be then redistributed to theaters of color. So I don't know where that's going to end up. I'm sure you'll hear more about it soon, but I think it's an exciting idea. I actually want to talk a little bit more about the capital side, I suppose, and the I'm going to cuss, and I'm sorry, but the mindfuck for me about this conference, and then I'm also part of the Wallace did a convening for the audiences for sustainability thing they're doing. And a lot of the things that we heard yesterday correspond with that. And this idea of dinner with friends is actually our competition, right? That people are not coming to the theater for the art, although the art is a main course, right? Just like a restaurant, and I'm sorry, but I don't know what just happened, but
A
baby appeared? Put the baby back.
You cannot challenge the baby.
Put the baby back.
Yeah, you cannot challenge the baby. The baby
Yeah, we'll always win. Fantastic. That's amazing. Thank you for totally, yeah. That's awesome. You're also not here for me. You're here for the baby. I get that. But this idea that people, and this doesn't devalue the art, and I want to be super clear about that. I'm at a theater company where the artist is the main thing. I know a lot of your theater companies are about the community. Steppenwolf is not about the community. We exist in a community and we serve a community, but our organization is about the artists. The 44 artists that are in our ensemble, the work that we do is for them. It is not for our community. But this idea that people come to the theater not for the art, but for the relationships, for the connection that they get. And that's the same thing with Dinner with Friends, right? And we've done a lot of audience research through this Wallace grant that says that people know about Steppenwolf, but our main competition is Dinner with Friends. And so like, how can we think about, and this is to me, I think more about selling the work than it is about the work itself, because the work itself has to be there. When you go to a restaurant, you go there for the food, right? That's part of the reason you decide to go to that restaurant versus a different restaurant. But the actual main course, I might argue, is the relationship development. And can we start to, as we think about getting more people, right? Because part of the point earlier was, how do we get more people at the table? How do we get more people at the table for organizations of color and predominantly white like the whole theater field, we need more people at the table. Well, maybe part of it is we need to change our message, and we need to stop marketing essentially to ourselves and showing pictures of artists doing great work, but maybe start selling the emotional connection that you get from experiencing a play with your friends.
Yeah. Can you come up here to ask the question, do you mind?
Yeah, come on.
Or write it up. Can you write it down and forward it to us? In fact, I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry about that. I just know that there are other people who are trying to, support the process. So if you have questions and you don't feel comfortable coming up front, just can you write them down and hold them up? I'm not getting any questions. So bring them. Hold them up and we'll come get them. Okay, and then, so you've just shared, Jonathan, thank you. And then, I think you were next, right, Paul? 2, 3, 4? Okay, remember your numbers.
All right, so what brought me up here was multiple points of reference. So I think it becomes completely important to redefine definition and to reclaim definition of words. So like what you said about community. You said that Steppenwolf is not necessarily supporting a community, but the community, you're redefining the word community by saying your community is your community of artists. And that if we as practitioners don't challenge the notion and the definition of words, then we're not actually redefining the spaces in which words have power, because words have tons of power. They shift the paradigm, they create possibility, they create the prisms that we all live in. So either we're going against it or not. But also what I wanted to say was this idea of knowing your lane a little bit. If we are able to define the lanes in which our purpose comes from, i.e. if we are consistently living in a black organization, our organization lives in the black line of always making some type of revenue or some type of dividend in, then we're doing our purpose. Maybe our purpose isn't to go beyond have a ticket that's $120. Maybe our purpose is to live in a space that fits that community, the definition of community, our definition of community, and understanding that lane is solely important to the ecology of theater, and if we try to challenge that ecology, then we're actually going against our purpose, our very nature, what our organization was intended for, which has a necessity. Is like my organization, I founded a theater company. That theater company, Deirdre is here representing the Movement Theater Company. The definition of that theater company might not meet the definition of the National Black Theater, which is a 47-year-old institution. It might not meet that definition. Doesn't make it inadequate, doesn't make it not purposeful, doesn't make it anything, but those two organizations have to know purpose clearly in order to be able to fit into the ecology. And I think consistently we look outside of our own institutions, outside of our own purpose to meet a broader scope because we see a shiny thing. That shiny thing might not be our shiny thing. And we have to be very clear about how we live inside of it. So I just think that becomes a consistent thing. We think about a capitalistic framework, we think about collaboration, and we think about the necessity of how does theater grow. Theater grows by kind of knowing what framework you actually want to operate in.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, we're going to hear from our other panelists, and then I've got a question specifically for you, so don't leave.
Yeah, I was thinking about this question about the narrative of scarcity versus the narrative of abundance, and we discussed it a bit in our little cohort just now, but I wanted to do so by just getting very unserious for a second, because I think it's just really important that we not be constantly weighed down by so many deep concerns. And yes, we live in the real world, but our theater is artist-centered. We, like the Lantern Theater described yesterday, we fill our space with work and artists all the time, around the clock. And we try and move that work into production as much as possible and share it with the public. This week, slightly shameless plug, we're doing a play called Shitloads of Money by Brendan Hill. And our production manager has had to ask our interns to counterfeit $1 million in $100 bills. And, I'm so accustomed to scarcity, and when it comes to finances, as a fundraiser, I'm always worried about, where the next dollar's coming from. And I'm so delighted to see interns just printing money backstage that I actually am giving tours to people. I'm saying, where are we now? Where are we now? 250,000. Okay, keep going, keep going. And it's so much fun to see. And a tip, we actually are hewing very closely to the rules regarding prop money. So it's only one side looks real, but if you stain it with coffee, it looks so real. And I get so excited, and it's really kind of silly that I do, but I've been doing this for so long, but to just get so excited seeing stacks of money out there. But I want to say that, one thing that's so important is to just remember that theater is fun, it's play. And, I feel very fortunate to be in an artist-centered organization where no matter what the bottom line is or the balance sheet looks like, and it's been getting better, it's a place where people remember to have a lot of fun, to love each other, and I think that and to love the process. And I think that does create an atmosphere, that ethos of sharing and giving and collaborating. And I think it's infectious, and I think people recognize it when they walk in the door. They can feel it.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks. This is a horrible place to be when you have ADD, because every idea is like, I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about that. And I guess the thing that I really want to talk about is that serving your own audience and knowing your own purpose idea. Because when I come here, we just spent 40 minutes arguing between the three of us that are from our theater, saying, wait, this, no, this, no, this, no, this, and how do you get back to what it is you actually are meant to do? And so we have a really hard time, this scarcity and abundance thing, because we came from nowhere for a long time, on the edge of being completely shut down for a long time, like most theater companies. And then all of a sudden, for the last decade or so, we've had incredible growth, or 2 decades, a lot of growth, and a lot of being in the black, and a lot of sustaining artists, which was a big portion of what we wanted to do, and focusing on what we wanted to do and do it well. And And we have a hard time believing that we're successful. We have a hard time actually owning that we have success and what is our responsibility now that we have success, and all the guilt that comes with that. And because it's fun. We are so lucky to be doing what we do. We are absolutely grateful for what we're able to do what we do. But what is our responsibility? Like, what do we do with this success? And it's marginal, obviously, but we are really looking at this idea of what you were talking about, David, which is the multi-level kind of experience, meaning it's really can feel threatening when people think, because we're a Shakespeare company in the middle of a gorgeous, green fields and think woods and all that, and people come there for so many reasons. And people would say, oh, I love that place, it's such a beautiful place. And you'd say that would really hurt your feelings about the art, but the art has to be good because there's a lot of places to go have a picnic, right? There's a lot of places to go have dinner with friends. So if the core of what you're doing is not essential, it's imperative that that's great, because they won't drive all that way and they won't make that effort to come to you. We are very specific in that regard. But how do we serve that audience on many, many levels? And how do we maximize that experience for expanding the audience as well? So we're really working hard on what are those supplemental ideas that make us effective on so many different levels. And you said food, but it's funny because I do think that dinner with friends is exactly the thing that we're up against. I think the $75 bottle of wine is a really good analogy for the people that are buying tickets. And I'm interested in what that experience is that grows us in connection, always connecting, beginning, middle, and end. We have a lot of speakers, we have a lot of educational opportunities on the property, but the big piece of it that's a question that we have is, how do we continue to be great at what we do and expand our notion of who we are at the same time? Great at what we do, keep the art great, but expand our notion of who we are.
Can I ask, is this kind of connected? Because this question to David is connected to what you just talked about. Is this?
It's connected to something that she raised about
Great. Okay, let me let you.
So I just, I want to speak very directly to that question. Why do people pay $230 to see Hamilton, right? And the reason is, I think, because it's Hamilton, right? It's won all kinds of awards, and it's got a lot of great press, and it's been legitimized. And that's why people will pay a lot of money for it. And so in some ways, I think, even sort of being a member of this organization or having won awards, and, only a few people can do that. There are a lot of people out there doing work that never gets recognized or seen. And so in a way, these organizations and these awards and all of this sort of recognition that we create, I sometimes wonder if it undercuts us a little bit by saying that is something that this is what we have crowdsourced as being fabulous, right? And all the rest of it is, save that money and go to dinner, right? And so I'm always on the fence about that a little bit. The reason people pay $600 for an iPhone is because they're a fool. But no, the reason you pay $600 for an iPhone is because, it's got this tremendous, it shows you all this glitzy stuff you can do, and everybody has one, and it seems like a tool you need. And I think that we need to be a little bit careful about that, I think. If we want to say, well, that's the legit theater, right? Or that's the profession, that's a professional company. These people are amateurs, or those are community people. I think, and that's, we know that this work is good because it's professional or whatever it is.
What it sounds like, I just want to say real quickly, what it sounds like also is that we're desensitizing the risk-taking spirit. Like that we're desensitizing the spirit of being able to say, I'm willing to do something brand new and take a leap of faith into the abyss and allow for that abyss to catch me. That's what it sounds like also. We're creating a society, a culture that needs that type of validation.
I want to introduce some questions from our audience to the panel. Can I do that quickly? And I think this one touches upon what the three of you have touched upon. This question is, so competition is dinner with friends?
Yes.
I agree.
Okay. And then let me introduce this other question to the panel, and then I'll open it up to New Voice. Why don't we encourage more social, this is taking us in a different direction, so you can bracket it if you want to, but I'm holding the space for the audience questions, and I want to do right by that. Why don't we encourage more social interactions and or connections at our theaters outside of simple talkback? Can we do more, or is somebody doing this already, to create more social capital in the service of making our theater communities less strangers in the room? Just something to offer. Okay, I want to be, we've got a new...
Respond to that? Or?
Okay, David, I'll let you respond to that, and any other person on the panel to respond to these, and then introduce a new voice number 1, new voice number 2. Oh, I'm sorry, you're new voice number 1.
No,
You're,
1, I'm 2.
Is that the right way? Okay, because I thought you actually, okay. Thank you for that, and you know your numbers. Okay.
I just, having just been to London and experiencing the theater and how the social experience is so central to that experience, we are thinking a lot about how we can kind of create that vibe. We're in the middle of a capital campaign and we're building a new building, so that's part of it. But we also just have a little 1,500 square foot space in our lobby that we're going to turn into a canteen bar and quite literally try to see if we can get people to spend more social time in our theater and make it more a part of the night out, make a whole night out.
I think that I was going to just add into that. I think that one thing that we experience when we go to talk to other theaters about our specific unique experience, which is we have 110 acres, so there's nature walks and there's places for barbecues and stuff like that. But the thing that happens every time is about connection. It's not necessarily about the barbecue or about the nature. It's about people coming together, and those people that come to see plays that we all have these theaters. They want to meet the people. They want to understand better. They want to be connected to something. They want to belong. And whatever assets you have, whatever they may be, whether it's an expert on your staff or whether it's young people that have new ideas, or whether that I think that finding means and ways, we are always trying to look for new means and ways of connecting our audience to our institution, and not just to the place proper, which are the reason they're there, but to each other, because they're there because they want to experience art, so they have something in common as well. So anytime we can get them talking to each other with us is an opportunity. So I just think look for those opportunities.
Thank you. Just a couple of examples. I'm sure there's more. If you want to write them down and forward them forward, great. New panelist number 1, and then 2, then 3, and then 4.
Hi, I'm Francine, and I'm the artistic director of New Stage Theater in Jackson, Mississippi. And I'm really nervous to say some of this stuff, so just bear with me. The word, it makes me feel so sad and bad when I hear the word pimping out, and I hear it and I totally understand it, and I know why we're doing things, and I want things to change, but I just want, and I know there's people like me, that we're doing things because we believe in them and we like them. And personally, and I can only talk about me personally, when I do a play like A Soldier's Play, I get hate letters in the mail. Sometimes from both sides, and I sometimes feel attacked from both sides, and I need help dealing with that, and I need people to help me, and I'm trying to get that help. But the reason why we do plays like Gee's Bend, the reason why we do All the Way last year is to raise that conversation, and we're doing it because we can, and that's not to say that I don't wish other organizations were doing that in our state. And I want to be able, and my question is basically, just so you know that when I started 10 years ago, I said as the artistic or interim artistic director 9 years ago or whatever, we did A Raisin in the Sun, and we did another play. I can't remember what play I'm thinking about right now, Crowns. And we did Gee's Bend, and I said something at a board meeting, which is getting more diversified, but I said something like, wow, we're, bringing in this new audience, and this is really positive, and la 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 la, and the comment back to me, just so you know what I'm up against sometimes, the comment back to me was, we can't forget our Northeast Jackson audience. That was from a board member. And I was like, those kind of comments make me want to cry, and sometimes I don't know what to do. And so is there a way to change the sentence so that when I'm talking to people who are now on my board, which is a different board now, when I want to take back the comment, pimping out, that trying to diversify our audience, trying to go out to the schools in our state, trying to do all these things can be perceived as pimping out. How can I change that comment? Okay. And what can I do? And I'm serious about the reason why I do these plays, the reason why I work with these people is not just because I think it's really important, but it's because those are the things I'm interested in. It's not for money. It's not for all those other things or grants or things like that. These are the plays I want to do. So, and I need not to direct them all the time. I know that's not fair. But I just want to change that sentence when I talk to people about it.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. How do y'all want to proceed? That question was put out, but I also know y'all came up here for different things. Does anybody here want to try to respond to that, or do you want to move in another direction?
I can quickly say something to that, but I would like to
Of course,
yeah.
of course.
I think that you're not going to please everybody. You have to come from a space of authenticity. You know when you are fishing for funding dollars. You know when you're pandering. And if that's not where the space comes from and you're authentically engaging in community, authentically engaging in dialogues, really reaching out across other theater companies, art makers that have the same passion and concerns, that's contagious. And so I say, we're art makers. We live and walk the tightrope of controversy, right? And if you listen to everybody who doesn't like your art, and you define yourself by the one person who's shaking their finger at you, if that's not where it comes from, then, you know, I'm gonna curse, fuck them. Like, really and honestly, that's not for them. You can only do stuff from the purest, best place, and people will come, and you will lose some people. And that's the brave line that we make as art makers. So I think that and your board will keep changing and shifting based on your kind of artistic mission or output. So I would say kind of ignore it. But what I wanted to say was...
Can I do this? Because this is such a courageous question, and I want to just do right by it. I'm gonna add one more thing, and then we're gonna...
And I wanted to comment on that also.
Beautiful. I think, and I'll hand it over to you two quickly, that part of what's embedded in that statement, pimping out, is talking about a history by which many theaters of color, many arts institutions of color that have been a part of partnerships that have not necessarily been equitable. And so one way to shift that frame is to do what David was talking about, or to the model that David was talking about, or I'm sorry, it was Catherine who was talking about having an equity clause, and we're creating more and more resources and tools that just redistributes the power, equalizes the power, and really names the value of smaller theaters and predominantly theaters of color. So again, it's, and just to sort of add to what Sade said, which is that in that statement, it does not mean to minimize or dishonor work of integrity and partnerships of integrity. We're hoping to have more and more of those models. So that would be my response, and then there were several more.
You said that very well, Carmen, because it's kind of what I wanted to say was I responded to X's comment about bring in an expert, and I have to say that I'm always involved in conversations where suddenly I become the expert, but I'm not paid as an expert. I want to be paid as an expert. So I think, as you know, a lot of times as people of color, as leaders of color, as people doing the theater work, that's really a key part of it, is that my work needs to be valued. The flip side of that is I need to learn how to ask how to be paid or how to get something for my company in exchange. And I don't know how to do that well.
Thank you for that very specific example. Yeah.
I was just going to say to you, in terms of the board, I guess that I would have a series of, I have a separate thing I want to ask, and I'll go after you. But that, so when you say that Northeast audience, and when you say that, are you saying that they don't want to go see Raisin in the Sun? Are you saying, I mean, like, to ask them, like, when they say something like that, do you not want, is that the implication? Will they not see it? Why? What are the, like, and when you begin to kind of like ask the questions of why and start to kind of go down that road, I feel like people start to hear themselves a little bit. You start to kind of go like, what do I really mean?
Thanks, Godfrey. Okay, we're going to have is this connected to this theme?
Yes. Travis Ray, West Coast Black Theater Troupe in Sarasota, Florida. One of the things that we did in reference to this too, because our company is newer, and within our community in Sarasota, Florida, it's 90 plus Caucasian. So we actually play opposite to what we do audience-wise, but with our buy-in, not just from our board of directors, but also with our community. We actually hold conversations and talks. Ours are called WBTT Voices, where you can actually bring these types of situations and questions to the community, as well as strategically bring in the people who you want to work with. And I think including artists as well within our areas, sister community theaters as well. And I think that will start to help. And then from there, that dialogue that you guys create, you can start to do work that's reflective of all of the buy-in from the community, from your staff, from your board, from other artists of color, as well as other artists that are not related in color.
Relationship building, equitable partnerships. Okay, thank you. Thank you. New thought, 2, 3, and then 4.
I actually wanted to piggyback on what someone was saying earlier about scarcity and this idea that like we're starving artists and we're just so happy when you come into our doors, this idea. I wanted to introduce the question about, what we focus on is contagious, right? And so joy is contagious. And so my question is, where is our turn on, right? Like, we should all, no matter if we are a managing director, a staff intern, a board, a trustee, are you working in your turn on? And when someone is turned on, everyone wants to be at that table, at that party, at that dinner table, watching that play. I think what Steppenwolf was saying is like, our focus is our artist, and you can tell in the way he talks about his artist, he's turned on. And even though he's not looking at outside communities than the artists, people will come because they want to be a part of that. So I wanted to add to this conversation, just like, are we pushing our staff and our board members to really answer the question, what is their turn on? Which translates to what's their commitment? And when we can invest in what people are turned on, I think we can see numbers funding shift. And so I would flip the question around scarcity and kind of being starving artists, and this idea of ticket pricing is, are you turned on by what you're selling or what you're inviting people to? And if you're not, as quick as possible, get to a place of pleasure and turn on and watch how things turn around.
This is connected to what Jonathan was saying, which was, just to paraphrase, know your lane, know your purpose, know your joy, know your turn on. The theater ecology is broad enough for all of us. Okay. New thought, and then Godfrey.
I'll try to do new thought. Everyone speaks it, my brain goes to what you're talking about. I'm Leilani, I'm with Theater Productions based in Los Angeles. I guess I'll go back to my focus was on the why are people afraid of anti-racists? Is that the question? Why does the words anti-racist make people uncomfortable? Why does that make people uncomfortable? Because we live in a racist society. I love talking about race, ethnicity, culture. It's what interests me. I go in with we live in a racist society. How am I internalizing racism? How is my relationship with other people of color? Do I check myself all the time, even though I'm a person of color? So I'm not afraid of that conversation, but I have been in conversations at conferences like these, sessions like these, where there's little microaggressions in conversations, and suddenly it's part of that expert conversation. Suddenly I'm the expert, not being paid for my opinion, which I'm happy to give. But I would like, income. anyway, where is that leading to? I'm also the local organizer for the network of ensemble theaters in Los Angeles, and I recently went to one of the listening tours, a conversation in Los Angeles, and only 2 white ensembles showed up. One white ensemble, when I brought up the diversity question, said, well, we have 5 white people, and we like working together in our ensemble. How do we change our audiences to be diverse? Not understanding the extreme racist statement that was to me as an artist who wants to be in an ensemble. And so and we're going through this, actually working with Oregon Shakespeare Festival, bringing the National Asian American Theater Festival to Oregon Shakespeare Festival, and understanding that this is a process. We all need to figure out, oh my gosh, that is a problem. And I'm sympathetic to knowing that there's 5 people that I am comfortable working with, and I am scared to let anybody else in. I totally relate to that. So how then do we move forward?
Thank you.
Godfrey Simmons, Artistic Director of Civic Ensemble. And one of the things that's kind of got me a little like, I'm a little discombobulated because I feel like some of the terms that we're using, even in talking about like opening the doors to everything, kind of assume a certain amount of privilege for people who are coming, for community members and people who are coming in to see stuff. I love the analogy of the dinner with friends and that kind of thing. There's so many people who cannot afford dinner with friends even. I mean, they could they could kind of like maybe have some family members over or something like that. But there's a lot of people who can't even get there, right? And when I think about the question of like, what are the forces that make theater trend more elitist, and how can we push back? I keep on thinking, well, what makes people with privilege? I am including myself in that because of my job and education and being a man. Why do people with privilege go? And what makes it comfortable for them to go? How do we make that appealing for them to go? Because we all talk about like, I want more people to come in. We want diversity. We've been able to see it in action. We did a reentry program where people who had been incarcerated did we did a theater program with them. They wrote plays, 8 men and women who had been incarcerated, different races. And we did a reading of these, filled the Hangar Theater in Ithaca. It was 350 people and there were heroin addicts in the audience, next to bankers, next to civil servants, next to people, who like worked for the city. I mean, like, it was amazing. And the thing that people kept talking about is like, I've never seen these people at this theater. I've never seen this happen here. And I think that the more, if there's a way that we can kind of wrap our brains around really thinking about how do we actually, the way to make the community and the audience and our shareholders and our stakeholders and our theaters to have like a real experience is to actually play around with who they're sitting next to. So think about, who are they sitting next to? Who's sitting behind them? And then after the performance or the experience, well, how are they connecting? Are they having a conversation afterward? I think someone talked about that a little bit. Like, do they get to actually meet each other? And is there a way for us as a community to facilitate that? Facilitate those different, that heroin dealer talking to that, city council person. Mm-hmm.
And I just want to add to that really quickly, and I'm looking at the time, we're going to get ready to, is that, that a part of looking at the class dimensions of theater going and theater going experiences is not just the ticket price. It's that experience in and of itself, and how do you remove as many class barriers as possible from that culture.
It's a culture. It's the culture of how we talk about it. It's the culture of how we present it. It's the culture of how we reach out. there's an assumption, and there's a bunch of assumptions that are made.
Well beyond the ticket price. Okay, thank you. I need some support. Are we totally out of time? So we're going to hear from the last. Is it possible to hear from at least our one last panelist? Yes.
I wanted to go quickly back to why does the word anti-racist make people uncomfortable? I think it makes us uncomfortable because none of us know really what to say. I feel like, it's like, I don't know, I don't want to say this because I feel someone's going to take it this way or that way. And for me, I've just learned, and again, I'm in a different generation, I feel that we just need to say it, but find a place where we truly have a sacred space where we can talk, and we need to create that among ourselves. Maybe in at your space or whatnot, or at this place here. We just need to have an honest, true space that we feel safe, but then we also have to be risk takers in the sense of just saying it or asking those questions. And I feel that when you genuinely come from that place, I feel more people will respect you.
Thank you, Travis, for taking on one of the challenging questions and wrapping up so nicely. Okay, folks, so that concludes our organic panel conversation, prioritizing the topics and themes that you all generated.
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, brave panelists. So just to recap why the heck we did this, and maybe I have both mics, but I'll just use this one. Take all the mics, there's no scarcity here, was to share an exercise in generative thinking. Maybe you don't do the fishbowl or some of the turn-in talks, et cetera, but just thinking about those 5 ways. I don't know if we can go back to that slide, but looking at flipping, widening, moving the center, dividing and conquering, really getting more specific with the question itself, and our apples and oranges analogy. Can you take some of those ways of thinking back to your theater? We're also thinking about our theater nation and how we can take some of these, maybe reframe this exercise, but are some of these exercises in generative thinking helpful for us for good governance and strategic planning? We also just really wanted to spend more time in the questions themselves, which we did. We think that's a helpful tool. And largely, can we use this exercise to think more collaboratively and realize the power of collective action, that there's so much more we can do together to get to our end goals? So that was the why, and we're almost out of time. So I'm gonna welcome Kevin E. Moore to bring us on home.
Bring us home.
And I don't think we always know.
Before we let you go, I did want to talk a little bit about one of our grant programs that we have coming up. We are heading into round 2 of a grant program funded by the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation called Audience Revolution. You may have heard of it. And this next round is going to be a little bit different. We are actually awarding grants in the amounts of either of $25,000, $75,000, or $200,000. For cohorts of up to 3 nonprofit organizations. So your theater can partner with another theater, locally or nationally or whoever, and another nonprofit organization. But the only stipulation is they do have to be nonprofit, and it doesn't have to be, the minimum is 3, correct? So it can be up to 5 or however many you want. But we're going to be launching that program next week. The guidelines for that program, applications are going to be due in February. Correct? We're going to have another, and it's also as part of Audience Revolution, we have some travel grants that are available of up to $7,500. Thank you, Kevin Bitterman. He's feeding me my lines over here. $7,500, we just announced some, and there's going to be another round of travel grants available launching in February. Did I do okay? Okay, good. I asked him why didn't he just do this, but listen, I got to tell you, I mean, are we tired? No, see, I'm kind of energized by this. I got to tell you that I'm sitting here listening. Over the whole weekend, I'm just amazed at how many smart people are in this room. It's just, it's encouraging and it's humbling, and I feel very fortunate to work in this business, and I hope you do too, and no matter what your work is. It's been a really fantastic weekend, and if there's one thing that I hope you will do when you get home, when you go home back to your theater, oftentimes you've had this experience with maybe one or two people on your staff or on your board, and you go back to all of your staffs and your colleagues on the boards, and you're trying to relay this experience, and it's difficult. But what I think at the heart of TCG, what we do is connect people, and I hope you've made some new friends this weekend. I hope you've made a deeper connection with some old friends, and know that you can call these folks if you need help. That's really what we do, I think, at the heart of everything we do at TCG. And so please do that. Take advantage of it. It's a gift. And you all have been a gift. And I love you all. And thank you for being here. That wraps up the Fall Forum. Wait, I got to do one more thing. Thank you, Dafina, Gus, Devin, Natalie, the conference team. Thank you. And thank you to the folks at Convene for everything you're doing. Thank you. It's been lovely. And thank you, Carmen. Thanks, everybody.